Hello, this is David Austin with the BBC News. The British Prime Minister's brother, Joe Johnson, has announced he's quitting as a Member of Parliament and Government Minister. His decision is the latest twist to affect the governing Conservative Party after it expelled 21 rebels who voted against the government in a key Brexit vote. Norman Smith reports.
The timing and very public nature of Joe Johnson's decision could hardly be more politically and, one imagines, personally wounding. In a tweet, Joe Johnson signals his clear disquiet over his brother's premiership. It has resulted, he says, in an unresolvable tension for him between putting family loyalty or the national interest first. Inevitably, Joe Johnson's decision has been seized on by the Prime Minister's political opponents. Labour said Mr Johnson posed such a threat even his brother had turned against him.
South Africa has temporarily closed its embassy in Nigeria. The Foreign Ministry said it had taken action because of concern for staff safety. Mayeni Jones reports from Lagos.
It's been a tumultuous few days for diplomatic relations between Africa's two biggest economies. On Wednesday, the Nigerian police said it was beefing up security around foreign missions and businesses. This came after South African shops were looted in a number of Nigerian cities. The looters claimed the attacks were reprisals for the killing of Nigerians in South Africa. But the Nigerian Foreign Office says none of its citizens have been killed in the recent violence in South Africa.
A court in Ukraine has released from detention a man viewed as a key witness in the investigation into the downing of the Malaysian airliner MH17. Jonah Fisher reports from Kiev.
Vladimir Semak is a former commander of air defences in separatist-controlled Ukraine. He's been charged with terrorism offences and is wanted for questioning by those investigating the downing of the passenger airline MH17. Today, Mr Semak was, to widespread astonishment, released from custody by a Kiev court, in theory pending a trial in October. Nobody is expecting him to show up for that. For the last week, the fate of Mr Semak has been widely reported as the final stumbling block in a large-scale exchange of prisoners between Russia and Ukraine.
The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned that Ankara may reopen the route for migrants into Europe if it does not receive sufficient support for its plan for a safe zone in northern Syria. Mr Erdogan said that his government wants to resettle 1 million refugees in the planned zone out of the more than 3.5 million Syrians who've taken refuge in Turkey from the war. Mr Erdogan wants the safe zone as a buffer against Syrian Kurdish fighters. World News from the BBC. The US states of North and South Carolina are being lashed with strong winds and rain as Hurricane Dorian approaches the coast. More than 40,000 residents in South Carolina and Georgia have been left without power. Parts of the city of Charleston in South Carolina are flooded. From there, Gary O'Donoghue has the latest on the hurricane.
It's around 80 miles off the coast here and a little bit southeast of us, but it's tracking up the South Carolina coast, and the concern later on today is that there will be a high tide at around 2 p.m. early this afternoon, and the combination of the hurricane being nearer into shore with the winds and the rain, the concern really is flooding. This is a pretty low-lying area. They call it the low country because of that, with anything between 15 and 20 inches of rain in the next 12 or 24 hours, that there could be some serious problems with water in the town before this thing has passed.
The World Health Organization has issued a warning of the risk of an epidemic of the waterborne disease cholera in eastern Niger as floods continue to swamp the area. More than 40 people have died during this year's rainy season. More than 65,000 people are now stranded because of the floods, which have destroyed more than 5,000 homes. A court in France has thrown out an attempt to gag a noisy cockerel. Maurice, the rooster, will be allowed to continue crowing despite complaining neighbours. The lawsuit was brought by a retired couple on holiday. Maurice's owner, Corinne Fessot, welcomed the ruling.
Il faut que les gens se rappellent que la campagne, on a besoin d'elle, et que les gens...
People must remember that we need the countryside, and that people who come for holidays, wherever they go, must remember this. They must stop filing lawsuits over nothing, for the crowing of a rooster. The noises in the countryside must be considered as normal. These noises must be accepted. If they don't accept this, then they shouldn't stay.
Those are the latest stories from BBC News.